It's funny that I had to write a review of this book for my literary theory class, and it sucked, so now I'm here asking for redemption. Hi everyone, so today I am coming back with a review. This is my second review, and I was thinking of making a couple of changes on the way that I review. I will add a couple of things. First of all, I want to start sometimes some novels, not all of them, but sometimes I want to start reviews with a little bit of context of the novel or whatever I'm talking about itself. And I wanted to do it particularly with this novel, to be Other Weapons by Luisa Valenzuela, although I didn't mention that in the beginning. But this I will add some context on, because usually when people review, they will focus on that historical part and what they think it wanted to symbolize in relation to that. And also, I want to add a couple of thoughts about the end at the end of the video, because I want to I want a separate section for more spoiler things that I want to discuss. This book was written in the 80s. It was published in Argentina in 1982. I'm not very familiar with the history of Argentina, but to my understanding, there was a long process in which there was either support or reaction against Peronism. And there was a time in which, during the late 70s and early 80s, I think, that Argentina went under a dictatorship that reacted against Peronism, and it seemed to be openly accepted by most people because they had this process of constant fighting going on, and there was a point, or so it seems to be talked about by most people who have reviewed this in its context. They tend to say that a large part of the population preferred to keep peace, and therefore they ignored things that were going on in the dictatorship that would later be considered to be crimes against humanity. What I'm referring to is military practices that included rape and killing, torturing. Lots of these people were very young, teenagers, sometimes completely. I mean, some of them are political enemies, some of them just belong to groups that were themselves political enemies. Sometimes they were just artists or athletes. Some people were taken by mistake and then killed because they needed to cover up that mistake. A very known case is an 18-year-old girl called Dagmar Hagelin, who was simply mistaken for another woman that they were targeting, and these teenagers, people in general, they were forcefully disappeared, like kidnapped, and they kept them in these buildings in different places, and they ended up killing them or torturing them or something like that. And she was taken by mistake, and they ended up killing her when they realized that it was a mistake. So when people talk about this novel, usually they emphasize on the connection between these situations and the situation that is presented by the novel itself, which is, let's say, at first glance, it would be very different, but most people think that it is supposed to represent this whole historical episode. Now, let me start with the writing style of the novel. I will give a full start to the writing style. The thing is that I personally prefer novels that are not too descriptive. And by the way, this is a very short novel, so there's not a lot of description. The descriptions, they're there, but you feel that they really are part of the story, and they're not just there to plant an atmosphere, so to speak, or anything like that. They're just there to advance the story and to give a more three-dimensional impression, I would say. It's a third-person narrative, something that the writing style accomplishes, for example, is that there are very violent and intense things going on in the story. And even though there's not a lot of description itself of these events, it is the writing style that gives it this really strong feeling of despair. The second point is the plot storyline, and to this I also give a full star. There's a very logical tie between the different sequences of the story, and at the end they all make sense. And the second time that you read it, which I did read it twice, it made even more sense. And even though it made sense, there was still a lot of things that were left to you to figure out. So it wasn't just, everything wasn't just said to you like that. I mean, you could connect things, but nothing was presented very obviously. Like I said, it starts making sense as you continue reading the story. And I must also use this part of the review to warn you that this story deals with rape and abuse, and I think it's particularly harsh to read because of what I just said about the writing style. There's not a lot of detail, but when you read it, it really gets to you, I think. At least for me, the first and the second time were very difficult to read that scene, and there's a couple of scenes with abuse or like sexual violence that I find very difficult. This is a very dense book. There's you know, the story is compact. It's quite compact because it's a very short story. It's about the size of the metamorphosis, and not many things happen, but they happen quickly, so to speak. But they feel, but you don't feel it's that quick, you know. It feels like a natural sequence in which things would really happen. Now, the story itself is given kind of this claustrophobic feeling because it all takes place inside of a house. Like I said, this is kind of one of the many connections that I see to the, and many people see, to the whole history of Argentina thing that I was talking about, in which people worked in buildings and cells and such. From the beginning, things actually seem very normal, but the more you read, the more you realize that you don't quite know what's wrong with what's going on, but there's definitely something really strange about the people around the main character. Now, speaking of characters, they all seem, I'm giving it another full star because the characters seem all quite human and real. And I must say this, Roque, which is the main male character, is possibly the scariest character that I have ever encountered in literature. Every time he entered a scene or he was mentioned, I felt like something horrible was going to happen. And that's not a feeling that I've ever gotten from a particular character before. And keep in mind that this is not a horror novel. And also the fact that even though he's quite scary, he still feels human and three-dimensional. He has a history, he has a particular personality, and he's really unpredictable, but at the same time, he's very cohesive. So it's a little difficult to explain. But Laura is the main female character. She makes very logical decisions. The story, for example, the story itself is about her having lost her memories. Like at the beginning of the story, she's lost her memories. But the thing is that the story is not really about her wanting to get them back. You know that there's something like a traumatic thing, an event that happened before she lost her memories. And in some way, you get this feeling that the reason why she knows she shouldn't investigate on these memories is because she probably can't handle it. And there's a difficult, kind of hard to interpret part at the ending of the story, But I think that even though it seems really weird for her to have made that decision or have said that, it's something that happens when you sometimes, not always, but it isn't known that that happens sometimes when you go through trauma and you're isolated and you only have like a couple people with you. And it feels like if any of us were to be in that situation and to have gone through the same things, we would probably do about the same things. They just both feel so real. And I just really give a lot of emphasis on the character thing. I think that having characters that feel like real people is incredibly important. Otherwise, I think the whole thing just falls down when you have characters that are like archetypes, well, like really strong archetypes, or just straight up stereotypes, or things that have been done before and such. Anyway, the next point is depth. In the story, you'll see that the narrator is making a separation between themselves and the main character, Laura. And one would think that Valenzuela, the author, is making like a parallel between a personal and seemingly private situation and a big scale political thing. And that's what most people would say about, most people that I've seen talk about this book have said that it is essentially just about politics, although, it could also be taken as being about violence against women or, things of that nature. Something that's very interesting and that other people have also noted about this book, and I will link below a video of people, of a conference that I watched about this book, although I think it's in Spanish, but in any case, I'll link it below. They're talking about how there's really strong symbolism in the story, and mostly they talk about things related to the body. So, Laura has a scar down her back, which obviously means that she cannot see it directly. She needs other people, or not other people, but she needs either another person or a mirror to see this scar. And it's something very similar to what happens with her name. She's informed what her name is. She doesn't naturally have a connection to her own name or Roque's name, with her husband's name. And all these things are kind of, you know yourself through other people, and you know your own body through other people and other things. And I think that the story is very coherent in its messages and its the thing that it proposes. Now, I spoke about the writing style making a feeling of dread in the story, and I think that's what makes a big difference in how themes are taken in a story. Themes like rape, for example, which I talked about in my last video, I think. It's not that, I've never been against the use of rape in a story. I know that people sometimes criticize rape being used as a plot device, but I'm not sure what precisely they're referring to, and the term itself is kind of ambiguous, I'm not sure. But I think this is a great example of rape in a story, because just with the writing style, it is not presented as something erotic and romantic. And one of the reasons why I said that this story was so intense, those scenes were so intense, is because it focuses a lot on how it is so humiliating for the victim and so shocking and difficult to deal with that situation in that moment. So when you read it, that's the feeling that you get, and that's something that I value a lot, that showing it, not telling it. The last point is my personal feelings towards the story, which I will also give a full star to. So yeah, this is a 5-star review, and I have to say it's really uncomfortable to read this story, But the thing that I like about it is that it's not the kind of story that you finish reading and you go, you know, I read this and I got it and I will never read it again, because it's not an experience that I want to have again. At least not for me. It wasn't like that, because the story is kind of, like I said, the story is a little ambiguous and cryptic. So the second time that I read it, you I picked up on more things than I did the first time, and also knowing the context and everything like that. Um, you pick up on these things that you feel were put there deliberately by the author. And that makes the reading much more interesting. Well, it's just as interesting as the first time. It's just that the first time it's a little more confusing. There's a certain sense of innocence the first time you read this book, because you are given this feeling as a reader that there's something wrong with what's going on. But the second time that you read it, you already know that it's all fucked up. So everything that happens it's kind of maximized um as something kind of violent and wrong, even if in the first read it seemed completely normal. Now for this video, I will not add a spoilery section at the end, because I don't feel like any comment that I give can really add much to the experience of reading until the end. The end is possibly the most in like the most intense part of the story, the first time that you read it at least. So I don't think I can add anything to the experience just by saying whatever. I just want you guys to feel not the need, to feel the, you know, to read this book. It's great. I just really like this book. That's all I'm gonna say. It's one of my new favorites, definitely. Yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know that I haven't posted in a while. The more that I know of it and the more that I think of it, the more I like it. And that's great, and that's really impressive, I think, for with all those things that I talked about, the writing style and everything. They were very impressive. They're really, really good. This is more of an experimental style book. I know I didn't mention that, but you know, in case you wanted to know like where it is more or less, I think you won't be disappointed. And if you are, you know, we can discuss it. It's fine. I've changed my mind about books before. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see each other on the next one. Bye!